This is absolutely the most spine-chilling horror feast as Scream 7 makes its shocking debut. The vanished Ghostface killer is no longer just a late-night nightmare, as he has once again appeared by your side, potentially your boyfriend, or perhaps your most trusted neighbor. This time, the truth beneath the mask will completely subvert your perception. In this hunting game, there is nowhere to run except to scream. Ever since the existence of Ghostface was exposed, a craze regarding the legend of Ghostface has swept across the entire nation. Centering around the terrifying Ghostface killer, a unique subculture has also emerged. This group is composed of influencers and private investigators who, based on the homicides from recent decades, have begun to delve deep into every appearance of Ghostface and the victims who met their end. Naturally, this also includes a fair share of die-hard stans. The first to be hyper-focused on is Stu Macher from the original installment, whose house has even been transformed into an Airbnb attraction, drawing in massive crowds of tourists every single day. This particular evening, two Ghostface superfans arrive at the scene. Looking at the outlines on the floor, Scott cannot wait to lie down, pretending to be a victim while striking various poses on the ground. Right there in the room, they even discover a Ghostface mannequin that is not only a one-to-one recreation of the killer, but even moves according to the tourists' positions. Watching her boyfriend, who has been unalived with a single blade strike, Madison screams out in terror. Panicked, she flees to the living room searching for a place to hide. But as soon as she reaches the upstairs, she is overtaken by Ghostface. Ghostface unsheathes a sharp blade, intending to hurl Madison from the upper floor, but she somehow manages to grab onto the living room chandelier. Staring down at Ghostface below, Madison tries to hook her foot onto a nearby stair railing. However, just as she is about to succeed, she loses her grip on the chandelier and plummets from the heights. Looking at the woman on the floor, Ghostface produces pre-prepared gasoline, splashing it throughout the house before finally setting it ablaze. The fire at the haunted attraction quickly hits the headlines. Nevertheless, the investigation results provided by the police state that the haunted house caught fire due to a short circuit, and the two tourists met their end accidentally. While the police explanation seems reasonable, it still cannot conceal the truth behind the scenes. The scene shifts to a small town. A woman arrives at a coffee shop. She is none other than Sidney, the survivor of the first Scream installment. Ever since escaping from Ghostface's blade, Sidney has been living a stable and peaceful life. She is now married and has given birth to a daughter. Although Sidney's monthly income is modest, with only 2 days off a week and a 2-month annual leave, the family manages to scrape by. Sidney originally thought she could spend the rest of her life in peace, but unexpectedly, Ghostface suddenly blows up across America. As a survivor from back in the day, she has become a local celebrity in town, with customers coming in every day to ask about the events of the past. Facing the persistent questioning from customers, Sidney is unwilling to recall the tragedy of the past, simply stating she survived by chance and wants nothing more to do with the matter. Yet Sidney has no idea that once you are targeted by Ghostface, you can never truly escape, and the reckoning for her is about to begin. In the evening, Sidney is organizing inventory in the warehouse as usual. Right as she is halfway through her work, the phone on the table suddenly rings.
I see you found a new town to live in. It reminds me a lot of where we grew up.
Oh, do we know each other?
We sure do. In fact, I was just in Woodsboro last night. Things got a little heated. But I'm here in Pine Grove now. I guess you couldn't be bothered now that you're so busy with a husband and family.
Hearing the voice on the other end, Sidney pays it no mind, assuming it is just a prank call from some obsessed fan. Over the past few years, she has frequently received similar calls. However, just as she hangs up and prepares to resume work, the phone rings once more. And this time, the person appearing on the screen is none other than Stu Macher, who has been dead for years.
Speaking of whom, your daughter, her name's Tatum. That is so adorable. I mean, it's a little weird or whatever, but it's super cute.
Do not talk about my daughter.
Staring at the crazed man, Sidney can no longer remain calm, warning him to never harm her daughter, or else he will pay the price. But before Sidney can finish her sentence, Stu hangs up the phone. Anxious, Sidney hastily dials her husband Mark's number. Mark is a police officer in the small town, and she tells him that their daughter Tatum is in danger. Learning that a fanatic has appeared at his daughter's school, Mark does not delay for a second and immediately drives to the school. Back at the school, the students are still unaware that Ghostface has appeared. A girl named Hannah is rehearsing a play with her classmate Aaron for next month's school anniversary. But when the wire harness is activated, it fails to lower, and a confused Hannah looks back only to find that Aaron, who is operating the machine, has vanished. Before she can figure out what is happening, the surrounding lights suddenly go out. Seeing the malfunctioning wire, Hannah assumes the equipment has failed and shouts loudly, wanting Aaron to shut it down. Yet despite her shouting for quite some time, there is absolutely no response from the surroundings. Just as Hannah is growing frantic, the door behind the stage opens, and Ghostface appears at the entrance clutching a dagger. Ghostface walks toward Hannah and uses the dagger to unalive her in a brutal fashion. By the time Sidney arrives, Hannah has already stopped breathing. Watching Ghostface on the stage, she opens fire without hesitation. However, because the distance is too great, she fails to hit Ghostface. When Sidney chases him to the backstage, she only finds the lifeless body of Aaron on the floor, while Ghostface has long since disappeared. Right at that moment, Tatum walks out from the backstage. Seeing her daughter is unharmed, the weight is finally lifted from Sidney's heart. The police, arriving shortly after, take control of the scene. However, among the students busy in the backstage area, no one heard a thing from the stage, and no one saw Ghostface. The reappearance of Ghostface leaves Sidney feeling worried, as she suspects that Stu might actually still be alive.
If this is Stu,
It's not Stu. It's not. He is buried in Woodsboro. Like, we are taking that phone call that you recorded, we're sending it to the state police. They have the resources to determine who it is. We are going to get him.
But Mark disagrees, speculating that this might be a copycat committing the deeds, and the police will surely bring this thug to justice. Considering Sidney's identity, Mark suggests the family should move away for a while and return only after the perpetrator is caught. Sidney agrees this makes sense and takes Tatum home to begin packing their luggage. Yet, while they are busy, they have no idea that Ghostface is already hiding in the attic. Watching her busy mother, Tatum feels they shouldn't run but should stay to find Ghostface instead. Looking at her naive daughter, Sidney feels a sense of helplessness. As the sole survivor from that era, she knows all too well how terrifying Ghostface truly is. Forget about them. Even if every agent in the entire town gathered together, they probably couldn't catch him. Though this Ghostface might be a copycat, she has no intention of putting her life on the line again. Leaving her daughter's room, Sidney returns to the bedroom. Just as she and her husband are packing, the lights in the house suddenly cut out, and Sidney and Mark lock eyes, instantly sensing that something is wrong. Seeing their daughter being held hostage, Sidney and Mark are both stunned. Sidney knows that Ghostface's target is herself, so she wants to trade herself for her daughter. However, Ghostface disagrees, as he wants to unalive everyone here. Taking advantage of the moment the dagger is moved away, Mark seizes the opportunity to pounce, and both sides engage in a struggle in the hallway. Sidney and Tatum want to help, but they are simply no match for Ghostface. During the struggle, Mark is pushed downstairs by Ghostface and lies on the ground motionless. Sidney dares not stay, leading her daughter to hide in the bedroom where she opens a secret door behind the wardrobe. Inside is a safety room. It turns out that because of her past experiences, Sidney had taken precautions in advance, creating a safety room in her home during the renovation. The walls of the small room are all made of steel plates, and once closed, it cannot be opened from the outside. Sidney tells Tatum to hide well in the safety room as she needs to go outside to call for backup. But the timid Tatum dares not stay behind, insisting on going together. Left with no choice, Sidney can only take her daughter and leave through the secret passage. Yet, just as they reach the hallway, Ghostface hears the movement inside the wall. In the panic, Sidney can only take her daughter and jump down from a gap. They reach the outside of the house through a hidden compartment in the basement. However, just as the mother and daughter emerge, Ghostface also chases after them. Right as Ghostface is about to strike, the unconscious Mark finally wakes up and launches a sneak attack from behind, tackling Ghostface to the ground. Sidney tells her daughter to find someone for help while she picks up a shovel, wanting to assist. But they are still no match for Ghostface. Just as Ghostface is about to deliver a fatal blow, a car suddenly rushes over. Looking at the woman stepping out of the car, Sidney is somewhat surprised. The newcomer is her old friend, Gale. Gale pulls back Ghostface's mask, but upon seeing the man's face, Sidney is stunned for a moment.
Who is that? I don't know, but I saw him today in the coffee shop.
You sure?
Yeah. Nobody knows the guy? Okay, that's weird.
That is weird. It's always someone you know.
It turns out Sidney had seen the man before, as he was the customer who hit on her at the coffee shop that morning. At this time, police backup finally arrives. Through an investigation, the police quickly determine the man's identity. The man is named Carl, a mental patient who escaped from a nearby psychiatric hospital 2 weeks ago. The police speculate that this might be a copycat crime, but Sidney feels it is not, as she always senses that Stu might still be alive, and Gale has the same feeling as Sidney.
Start what? I'm not starting anything.
We have to find out who's behind this. That guy in the road, Carl Gibbs, is not some random killer. It's always someone connected to your past.
The police can handle it.
That would be your husband, and we need to help him. Don't you want to know who's behind this?
Yeah, I can't anymore. I need to be with my family. I need to know they're safe.
That's why you need to help me. Whoever is targeting you is not gonna stop. You know that.
Oh, slap my face if it isn't the Gale Weathers. Hi, oh my God, I am so sorry. Your show got canceled.
The man in the video claims to be a Ghostface superfan and says that the one just unalived was only one member of their team. They want to recreate the scene of Stu hunting Sidney from back then. As for the appearance of Gale, the man seems to have anticipated it well in advance. Hearing the man's warning, the hearts they had just let down once again leap into their throats. Considering Ghostface's previous identity, Sidney speculates that the man who called might also come from the same psychiatric hospital as Carl. As long as they can determine the other's identity, they will surely be able to bring these scoundrels to justice. Sidney decides to take the initiative, teaming up with Gale to head to the psychiatric hospital for an investigation. Tatum suggests wanting to go along to avenge the deceased Hannah, but Sidney feels it is too dangerous and does not plan to take her. Leaving the town, Sidney and Gale arrive at the psychiatric hospital. From the words of the hospital supervisor Marco, they learn information about Carl. Carl is a thug who was arrested 20 years ago for brutally unaliving 3 women. But because he suffered from a severe mental illness, he was sent to the hospital for treatment. Although Carl's condition improved somewhat after treatment, his temper remained very violent, and he often injured other patients. To prevent him from hurting other patients, the orderlies locked him in a room. But in an accident, Carl secretly escaped from the hospital. Looking at the graffiti on the wall, Sidney thinks of the man who called her previously. She opens her phone and shows Marco a photo of the man. Marco recognizes him at a glance as a patient of the hospital named John, an amnesiac who was also good friends with Carl. Over 20 years ago, he attacked a high school student and was subsequently sent to the hospital. However, John was already released 2 weeks ago. Gale wants some files regarding John, but the hospital doesn't have any. Marco suggests they check the courthouse, as the court sends people over for inspections every week. But they are not public officials and have no way to access the relevant information. Sidney contacts Mark, wanting the police to find the courthouse staff. Gale speculates that John is a Ghostface superfan, and that since the other party wants to imitate Stu, he will definitely act again. She thinks of a way to lure John out. Gale wants Sidney to accept an exclusive interview. If John sees the program, he will definitely contact Sidney, and the police can then use this opportunity to find John. Sidney also feels this suggestion is good, so they immediately head to the television station. Meanwhile at home, Tatum has already been placed under police protection. Gale's 2 assistants are checking the home's surveillance footage, trying to figure out how Carl got in. But as Chad flips through all the footage from within the week, he cannot find any trace of Carl's infiltration. Moreover, what is even more absurd is that Sidney encountered Carl at the coffee shop in the morning, meaning Carl only hid in the attic that afternoon. Yet, Tatum's home surveillance clearly surrounds the entire house, but it completely failed to capture how Carl entered. Chad finds it strange and suspects there might be other secret passages in the house, which Mindy also feels is possible. While they are thinking about how Carl got in, Tatum walks over. During their conversation, Tatum only then learns that Gale has been doing a column on Ghostface for all these years. They investigated all the cases and found that these cases are basically committed by acquaintances, with some killers motivated by envy and others being Ghostface superfans. As for the real Ghostface, he died decades ago. Mindy believes Carl couldn't possibly have completed the entire unaliving plan alone, and thinks the killer must be an acquaintance of Sidney's family. Hearing their speculation, Tatum feels they cannot just sit around like this. But with Ghostface hiding in the shadows, how can they lure the other party out? Tatum thinks of a way, but it requires leaving the house. Chad feels it's a bit risky, fearing that if an accident happens, it might lead to trouble. However, Tatum firmly believes they have the ability to handle all the trouble. Under Tatum's persuasion, both Chad and Mindy are somewhat moved. In order to get first-hand material, they agree to Tatum's proposal. In the kitchen, Mark still doesn't know his daughter has snuck out as he contacts the court to submit an application to access the records. While waiting for the notification, Mark hears a strange clicking sound coming from the garage. He goes to the garage and finds that the garage door is unlocked, which Mark pays no mind to, assuming a worker forgot to close it yesterday. He casually locks the rolling door and turns around to leave. Right at that moment. Meanwhile, in the small town's bar, Tatum still doesn't know her father has met with an accident, as she has found her boyfriend Ben and several classmates, wanting everyone's help to find Ghostface. Just as everyone is analyzing whether Stu has truly died, Sidney's interview is broadcast on television. In the live broadcast, Sidney appeals that if the killer imitating Ghostface has any problems, they can contact her via phone. However, the broadcast continues for nearly half a day, and Sidney's phone shows no response at all. To stall for time, Gail can only change the subject, talking about the victims from back then. It turns out that the name of her daughter Tatum was also chosen to commemorate Sidney's best friend. At that time, her best friend was pursued by Ghostface along with Sidney, but the best friend was brutally unalived by Ghostface, a fact that has always been a painful scar in Sidney's heart, which is why she gave her daughter such a name. The live broadcast quickly has an effect, as Sidney really receives a call from John.
Oh, Sid, do you need...
We've been waiting for you.
Why, so I can stay on the phone long enough for you to trace the call?
Yes, dumbass. Or you could just tell us where you are.
Great, I'm at Parker's Tavern with your daughter.
Learning that her daughter is not at home, Sidney is also stunned. But before she can speak, John hangs up the phone. Sidney hurriedly leaves the television station, heading toward the bar. Meanwhile, having learned the origin of her name, Tatum decides to head to the television station to find her mother. Just as she is getting into the car, she notices Ben's laptop. She opens the computer only to discover that John has appeared on the screen. It turns out that the person who just called Sidney was not John at all, but rather a virtual image synthesized by Ben using AI. Discovering that her boyfriend is actually the Ghostface hunting her, Tatum is completely stunned, knocks Ben out, and flees from the car. But right as she turns around, she sees another Ghostface walking from the corner. In a panic, Tatum turns and runs toward a nearby street. Back at the bar, Chloe, who is busy in the back kitchen, is targeted by Ghostface. During the struggle, Chloe tries to pick up the dagger on the floor, but when she looks back, she finds that the Ghostface behind her has turned into Chad. Before Chloe can figure out what is going on, Ghostface appears from behind, finishes off Chad, and walks toward Chloe once again. A terrified Chloe flees from the back kitchen. Just as she reaches the entrance, she encounters her classmate Lucas, and she tells him that Ghostface has appeared in the back kitchen. Lucas still wants to play the hero, believing he can handle Ghostface. But as soon as he rushes into the back kitchen, he is pushed back out. Looking at Lucas on the ground, Chloe can only shiver in the corner. And fortunately, the Ghostface who chases out doesn't see her. Hearing the sound of the door opening, Chloe thinks Ghostface has left. She wants to call the police for help, but unexpectedly, just as she stands up, Ghostface appears at the door. Ghostface seizes Chloe and pushes her toward the glass cups on the bar. Chloe is thus bled to death by the broken glass, and the heavily injured Lucas on the ground also fails to escape his doom. Meanwhile, Tatum has run to the street where she shouts loudly, seeking help, yet there is absolutely no response from the surroundings. In a panic, she hides in a corner. Right here, she encounters Ben. Seeing the blood-covered Ben, Tatum finally realizes that she had misunderstood him. They want to leave quietly, but Ghostface suddenly appears and ambushes Ben. Watching Ben's tragic death, Tatum is completely terrified. She hides in her mother's coffee shop, and not long after, Ghostface also chases after her. Tatum can only crouch in the corner. Fortunately, Ghostface does not discover her, but just as Ghostface is about to leave, Sidney gives Tatum a phone call. Although Tatum hangs up immediately, the sound still draws Ghostface over. Sidney runs into the warehouse and blocks the door with heavy objects. Tatum tells her mother about what happened at the coffee shop. Learning that her daughter is hiding in the coffee shop, Sidney also immediately opens the surveillance, and she tells her daughter that there is a handgun in the warehouse cabinet. Tatum hurriedly opens the safe and takes out the weapon. Under Sidney's command, Tatum fires several shots at the wall. Ghostface outside is hit by the bullets and lies on the ground motionless. Tatum thinks she has successfully taken down Ghostface. However, just as she is about to find a phone to call the police, another Ghostface appears at the door. By the time Sidney arrives at the coffee shop, Tatum has long since disappeared, and she only finds that handgun on the floor. Just then, Tatum's phone rings. Sidney answers the call and finds that it is Ghostface calling. Learning that her daughter has been taken back home, Sidney does not delay and rushes back immediately. Right in the backyard, she finds the tied-up Tatum. Ghostface forces Sidney to put down her weapon. For the safety of her daughter, she can only comply. Under Sidney's shocked gaze, Ghostface removes the mask, revealing his true face. This Ghostface turns out to be the psychiatric hospital supervisor, Marco. Just then, another Ghostface walks out from the doorway. Seeing two Ghostfaces, although Sidney is somewhat surprised, she is not too shocked. Marco drags out the heavily injured Mark. Looking at her husband on the ground, a look of panic finally appears on Sidney's face. But before she can speak, the other Ghostface also reveals her face.
Hi, neighbor. Jessica.
And it is actually their neighbor, Jessica. Sidney is completely stunned, unable to believe that the person hunting her family is actually her neighbor. Looking at the shocked Sidney, Jessica displays a triumphant smile. And the reason she wants to hunt down their family is entirely because of Sidney's autobiography. It turns out that Jessica's marriage was very terrible, and she was frequently subjected to domestic violence by her husband. Having been abused for a long time, Jessica's mental state had problems, and she was sent to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. While in the hospital, she happened to meet Carl and Marco. During an accident, Jessica coincidentally saw Sidney's autobiography. Ghostface's way of doing things made Jessica and the others deeply obsessed. After being discharged, Jessica imitated Ghostface and unalived her husband. Having completed her revenge, Jessica became completely obsessed, believing that Sidney is an imperfect masterpiece. In order to complete the unaliving for Ghostface, she planned a series of actions targeting Sidney. However, Jessica did not notice that Mark on the ground had taken out a small knife, and he cut Tatum's tape. Just as Jessica is about to strike, Tatum takes the opportunity to ambush her.
No, Mom, come on, no.
Seeing Marco taken down, Jessica runs into the nearby garage, and Sidney hurriedly chases in, where they engage in a struggle in the garage. Although she is a Ghostface fanatic, Jessica clearly underestimated Sidney's skills, and she is soon pinned to the ground and beaten by Sidney. At this moment, Tatum, who has called the police, also arrives at the garage. Seeing Jessica on the ground, Tatum thinks her mother has finished her off. Unexpectedly, when they look back, they find that Jessica has vanished again, so they cautiously search around the garage. At a corner, Jessica, hiding in the shadows, still wants to launch a sneak attack. Looking at Jessica on the ground, Sidney's heart is finally at ease. Afterward, the police also arrive at the scene, and the heavily injured Mark is sent to the hospital. The above is all the content of the latest 2026 thriller, Scream 7. Friends who like this type of movie can watch the original film, and we will see you in the next episode.